You're a friend to all, John.
All right, well, shall we get started?
Should record these lead-up sessions. They're always more interesting.
I mean, it is recording. I can throw it in. All right, hello and welcome again to a new episode of the KewCast. I'm John, joined again by my good pal Eddie.
Hey, John, good to see you in person.
For sure, it's been a while.
Almost a month, I think.
I mean, indoors, that is. We've been playing outside here and there.
Indoors, same studio space.
Yeah, but I'm glad to hear that you are feeling better and you're COVID-free.
99%.
99%, which
can
in
always
my
be
mind
better.
is 100%. Right. Cool. We got a good show today, Eddie. We're going to talk about a little bit of latest news and then jump into paddles of the week. And again, as July is providing us with so many paddles, this is going to be the meat and potatoes of the
What are we
episode.
doing today? 15, 20 paddles, John?
Why not? Let's just cover our whole wall back here. And from there, I've got a little Tales from the Ball Cannon. And I haven't done that in a while, but got some updates there. Some gear of the week this week. I want to talk about the 6-0 bags. And finally, Kew A.
All right.
Let's jump into it. So for latest news, gear gossip, first thing is we got some new results from this ongoing poll that I've had on the website now for a month or so, and that is the People's Choice Pro and Paddle rankings. So if you haven't seen that webpage, I'll link to it, and it's what pros are playing with which paddles most currently seen at X tournament. Mm-hmm. So currently we have MLP New York City was the most recent update from last weekend. And it's not necessarily the paddles that the pros are sponsored by, but it's whatever they're playing with. Usually is their sponsor, but sometimes not. So another thing you can vote on for this, so I'm filling in the paddles, but you can vote.
Before you leave that topic, though, any outstanding, noteworthy changes or updates there?
No, I heard, I did not catch the MLP before this New York City, but I heard that last MLP was Kwangdong was playing with this Cypic paddle.
Okay.
So he's not playing with the blacked out Holbrook anymore, according to somebody who kindly emailed me about that. Otherwise, Fed's still playing with the Scorpius, and so is Leia and Colin. They're all playing Scorpii, and got the Perseus 4 is what most other yellow pros are playing with, although there's a few 3S's in there. So
I love that you got your little army of minions out there all like with their binoculars spying.
Yeah. So
okay, John, this is great for John. I got to let him know.
Yes, that's actually very helpful too. And if you do see something in there that is wrong, then email me about it. I've got a link on that page. But another thing you can do is vote for what your favorite pros are on that list. And it's 50, at the top 50. And it's, people's choice. So originally, when I first put it up, Ben Johns floated at the top. ALW is close second. Anna Bright third. Then it's flip-flopped. So ALW was on top for a good while. And now it's flipped back. So Ben Johns has retaken the number 1 spot, according to your votes, with ALW right behind. And
not Anna Bright.
Not Anna Bright. Gabe Tardio overtook third place. Yeah. Yeah. Now, these are very, very tight margins. There is actually 1 vote between first and second and 1 vote between third and fourth. So Ben is 1 vote above Anna Lee, and Gabe is 1 vote above Anna.
So what is that? Is that encore performance, recency bias?
Yeah, it's whatever floats your boat. I like their clothes. I like the way they play. It's kind of fuzzy.
Haircuts for Gabe.
Haircuts. Gabe. Do you think if his rating would go up if you got a different haircut?
Maybe so.
Maybe. So yeah, jump in and vote. I'll put another link in the description for that. I think that's a fun ongoing thing we have here. Let's move on. So a physicist reached out to me and he said that he's deep into number crunching and analytics and statistics, and he's also a paddle nerd like us. And he took all my data from my paddle database and dumped it into this new system, not new for him, but I had never seen it before, but it's called UMAP. It's a dashboard, and I'll put a link in the description. You can actually interact with it, but it's a really powerful tool for visualizing sort of multi-dimensional metrics. So paddle database is perfect for that. Bunch of metrics, hundreds of entries for that. And I'm not going to pretend like I know the theoretical physics behind this, but it's pretty heady stuff. And essentially we'll look at the graph in a second, but paddles are placed on the basis of 10 attributes, 10 metrics that he plugged in. So I'll name them off in a second. And the proximity of those paddles to each other is how close they are based on every single one of those metrics. So it's kind of mind-boggling to look at because I'm used to thinking about two metrics on an XY graph, and it's not. And there's some really cool kind of science and theory that goes behind the actual algorithm that lumps these and plots them in 2 dimensions. So it is using first of all, the 10 variables are spin, length, width, handle length, static weight, swing weight, twist weight, balance point, power, pop. Nine attributes, sorry.
And price.
Price is on there, but it's not included in the attributes spacing that.
Gotcha.
But you can turn price on to look at where price is distributed within that shape. So the data is just, this is where I was interested. I did way too much reading yesterday on this, but I still don't profess to understand it fully. But the data is distributed using the Riemannian manifold. And a manifold is kind of like a way to plot things in curved space. So instead of like linear, 90-degree angles. So a manifold is basically anything where, imagine like an ant walking on a donut. He's walking around. It's a really weird shape, but wherever he is, he's feeling like he's walking on a more or less flat surface. In the same way that you and I are walking around on this globe-shaped Earth, and we feel like we're on a flat surface, there are people, actually the Indian Ocean is exactly on the opposite side of the globe from us, but there are people more or less on the opposite side of the Earth. Even though they're standing upside down from us, they still feel like they're on, their perspective is they're standing upright on a flat surface. So that's kind of the theory of it. And it also uses a mathematical tool called an inner product, which measures each variable and their trajectories, so how far they're split from each other, how much one vector points away or toward the other. And then it's taking this kind of incredibly complex, 10 variables and mapping these complex relationships in a geometric space, 2-dimensional geometric space. So here in front of us, did you have something to say? It looked like something on the edge of your tongue there.
I'm waiting for it to all click.
Okay. So here's the result. And I think this is fascinating to look at. And again, this is interactive, so you can click on each one of these dots. There's a table up top. We can scroll down and you can click on the paddle you're interested in, and it'll highlight it in this space. But what I found fascinating is this kind of, first the overall shape, and then my original inability to actually kind of pinpoint where these paddles are spaced according to that overall space. So, the overall shape of it looks like, I'd call it a butterfly.
Yeah, bow tie,
butterfly, 2 opposed parabolas. If you want to get fancy. But also you can change the legend. So right now it is colored by price. You can also play around with the size of the dots based on power, pop, and any other metrics used to calculate all this. So after playing around with it for a bit, and like I said, my mind wanted to go 2 dimensions and 2 metrics, and I wanted to be like, all right, power is over on the right and pop is on the up and down axis, but it's not anything like that. But it is cool kind of seeing the groupings here. So if you go down, the one thing, did you play around the different sizes based on the different metrics?
I did.
Okay.
Yep.
Did you find any patterns?
Well, why don't you finish your thought, and then I'll get into...
All right. The thing that I think drives this shape the most and makes it kind of clarifies it a bit are length, width, and power metrics. So if you look at this butterfly, the wide body paddles are over on the left, and the thinner paddles are over on the right. And in a corresponding fashion, obviously, the longer paddles are going to be over on the right because of the rule of 24, and the shorter paddles are going to be on the left. So that's driving a lot of the left-right movement, and then power and pop are driving a lot of the vertical movement. So you can see a lot of the high-priced paddles over here in the longer/lower portion of this, or longer/ more poppy, more powerful version of this. So you're paying for the power paddles down here. You're paying for the paddle powers down here, which are the wide bodies, right? So I'll show this on the screen. But yeah, did you find any other?
So what's creating the vertical differential in this
Now,
visualization.
It's all that weird, matrix that I discussed in terms of the theory, but more or less it's patterning where there's less power up top and more power down low.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around this whole bow tie thing and figuring out what it means. I did play around with the two-dimensional graphics on this and then found that in and of itself fascinating.
Yeah.
So I started off by looking at, is there a correlation between price and power?
Mm-hmm.
And what you would expect to see is if those were correlated, that you'd see kind of a 45-degree line, from the origin up to the top right. And you kind of do see that on that graph. It's not a perfect line, of course. There's going to be variations from that line, but you do see a correlation between price and power, which I, in and of itself, found interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And if you look at the butterfly, the lower portions of its wings are more expensive, and that's where the power pop max out.
Mm-hmm. Likewise, length and power have some correlation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's fun to play around with these different dimensions that are kind of normally more difficult to see connections.
Yeah.
But this is really cool.
Yeah. I mean, I only started to kind of explore the connections here, but I'm sure there's some weird, proximity between two paddles that you would never suspect otherwise. But all 10 of those variables coalesce and sort of push those two together, So
Yep.
I want to search for those next. The oddities in there. Yeah. So I forgot to write down that gentleman's name, but very nice for him to spend the time doing this. I'll link to his website where he's put up this data. All right, Eddie, let's move into paddles of the week.
Yeah, man.
This week we're primarily focusing on the Honolulus because I'd like to put out a review of those. So the Honolulu J2FC Plus and the Honolulu J2NF. They're full foam paddles. We've already talked about these briefly, but we took them out again and hit with them. And we also took out many of the other all foam paddles, foam core paddles that are being released or have been released recently, and compared them on the basis of firepower and forgiveness. So let's lump these together because they're so similar. I don't think there's a reason to really separate them into two at this point. But both of these are priced at $195. You can pre-order them now. They're expected to ship on August 6th. So you got a month here to wait before they ship. That's $195 is before code, so you can knock 10% off that. They're coming out also, this is big news, they're coming out with a longer handle version. So they're calling this 5.5 inch. This is the same J2 shape they've always had, which is a fantastic shape, but it's not a 5.5 inch handle. That is a 5.3 inch handle.
I'm on it with two fingers on,
Right.
on the left side.
Yeah. It's not as comfortable to hold.
5.3?
It's 5.3.
Yeah.
And they're coming out with what they're calling a 6-inch handle, and I haven't got that yet, but I imagine it's about a 5.5 or maybe slightly higher than that, maybe 5.6.
They can't just call it a 5.5 inch handle.
Maybe they're measuring to someplace else. The way I measure a handle, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I go from the bottom to where the handle stops, and that includes the tape holding the handle onto the metal face. I feel like that's where it should be measured, right? But maybe there's maybe the handle stops at the center. I don't know. Anyhow, that one I think is going to be a big hit, and what they've done is the overall length is going to be the same. It's going to be a curved top. They've just made a more aggressive taper on the neck here, so it's going to cut in tighter here, and you're going to lose some of that thick neck down at the bottom.
It's not going to look like a pizza spatula, is it?
No. It actually looks really nice. Kind of the look of so take the Selkirk SLK ERA wide body and the elongated and make those hybridized. That same curvature and look is what you get with it. Looks pretty good.
Can you talk a little bit about the construction?
Yeah. So let's look at the x-rays. So the J2 FC Plus is expanded polypropylene core in the center and EVA band around the edge. And it's just, the simplest of these two paddles in terms of the construction is literally just a band. There's also edge foam that only starts at the shoulders, goes down through the neck and through the handle, but the edge foam doesn't come up to the lateral edges here. And
is there some kind of a wall in between those two types of foam?
No, it is a little
foam
bit
to
of a
foam.
space, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. And the J2NF, so this says NFL. This is the early version. They've dropped the L, now it's just the NF. It stands for notched foam, and you can see from the x-ray, it looks like, as you said last week, puzzle pieces fitting together. And it's the same EPP foam in the center and the same EVA foam in the outside, but they've interlaced the EPP and EVA and that saddle notching. And it's the same construction otherwise, so you get edge foam going down through the shoulders, neck, and handle.
So in the x-ray, it looks like there might be some perimeter weighting on this
Oh,
one?
no, that was actually my...
Or was that your perimeter weighting?
Yeah,
Gotcha.
I put some 3-gram strips
Gotcha.
on the shoulders there, but I took those off.
Okay.
Yeah. They are moving to a 1-year warranty also, which is fantastic. And these have this optimal swing weight and twist weight range. So lower swing weight of 110 to 114 on average for both of these, and a twist weight of right at 7 plus or minus 0.1.
Nice stats.
Yeah. All right, Eddie. What'd you have to say about these?
I don't really see a point to having two paddles that are the exact same look, same colors, basically same performance. I had a really hard time distinguishing between the two. In fact, I did kind of a blind taste test, and I purposefully didn't look at the logos or anything like that. And because they're the same color, you can kind of do that, just kind of look away.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, I'm going to serve a couple, I'm going to dink a few, I'm going to drive some and see if I can see which is which. And it was very difficult.
Yeah. I did the same after you, and I had a pre-impression after playing with both of them for a while. And I guessed right, but it could have been, it was so close. I was just like, I think I'm right here. And I looked down and I was, but I could have been just lucky and chose, a 1 in 2 chance for the right one.
Yeah. So I don't really understand the reasoning for that, but honestly, they are great feeling paddles.
Yeah.
They play well. They've got sufficient power and pop. The feel is there's some plushness in there as well, and really great sweet spots. So there's really no downside except for the confusion of which one to pick.
Yeah, there's a lot of confusion also in different face layups. So there's both titanium and Kevlar for both of these, as far as I know. I'm not sure about the FC Plus, but I know the NF comes in Kevlar and titanium. So I'm going to simplify everything in my review of these because I think they're fantastic paddles. But I agree with you. They play very similarly. I would say that the notch foam, the NF, feels a little stiffer, particularly it's a little poppier. It might just, my sense of the pop, I haven't actually measured the radar gun pop yet, but my sense of the pop might be coming simply because it feels stiffer to me. It's a more lively response. And the FC Plus has a bit more muted feel when the ball strikes the paddle in terms of it feels like it sinks in, it feels more foamy. Both of them feel almost identical, but if I had to split hairs, that would be the one difference I could tell between the two. Overall firepower, I'd say, is exactly the same. I've been hearing people say that the NF is more aggressive of the two. Maybe it feels more aggressive because it feels a little stiffer and you get that sense of more pop. But I think, if this is more poppy, it's a little less more powerful than the FC. I think it balances out in the end, that power pop, distribution.
Yeah. If absolutely forced at gunpoint to try and define the difference between these two paddles, I'm kind of there with you. The notched foam, you're right, it does feel a little bit more poppy. It's got more of a hollow sound and feel, whereas the FC feels a little bit more stable throughout.
Yeah.
A little firmer throughout. So that's more or less how I would describe the differences. But if you're looking for any differential in actual power and pop, I think that's going to be really hard to pin down.
Yeah. I gravitated toward the FC. That was my favorite of the two, but barely. Small margins,
Really difficult.
Yeah. And the sweet spot on these is fantastic. And I'd put the power, we'll talk about this power compared to the other foam paddles coming out, but it's definitely a power paddle, but manageable. I don't feel any issues dinking at the kitchen with the soft game. It's not extraordinarily, neither one of these are extraordinarily power or pop heavy, so that you're not feeling like you can't control the ball. It's not popping up as much as some of the other paddles we were hitting with. So I think this is a going to be a popular paddle. I think it already has a ton of pre-orders. And, again, when the long handle version comes out, I think that's just going to kill it. It's going to be a super popular paddle.
Yeah, if it's my money, I'd probably wait on that one to see what it looks like, how it plays. I do prefer a little bit longer in the handle. True 5.5 would be perfect.
Yeah.
Never been a huge fan of the branding and the graphics and the color selection. I can look past that if the performance is there. So for me, I'm going to hold off a bit.
Yeah. All right. What was I going to say? Oh, you can look into the X-rays too. There is the band of perimeter weighting in terms of that strip of carbon fiber along the lateral edges. My thought is that they increase the aggressiveness of the neck taper and increase the handle size, you're going to lose a little bit of twist weight when this bottom part of the neck gets chopped off here, the cheeks here.
Have they put out any marketing speak on the differences between these two?
No, as far as I can tell. But I don't think that's going to, I think the twist weight's going to more or less be the same between the longer handle, maybe a 0.1 difference. I don't think it'd be a huge difference because they're messing around with this internal weighting, and they might just add a extra little strip here and there of carbon fiber to the edges to make it that 7.0 swing weight that they're very fond of.
But for today, John, your choice is the FC?
Yeah.
You? Right. Yeah, same.
Okay.
I really wanted to, when you showed me the X-ray of the notch, I'm like, okay, that's really cool. There's got to be something there. And
right.
I'm really excited to play with this, and
not so much.
Not disappointed, but
no.
It's again, the difference is really hard to distinguish.
Yeah.
In fact, for me, I prefer feel over pop, and so I'm going to go to the other one.
Okay. Sounds good. We were going to talk about the Mark O2R2. Let's kick that to next week because we don't have the paddle with us, and it doesn't really fit in today's discussion.
Sounds good.
But we did pull out many of the paddles we talked about last week and did another firepower comparison. And if you could throw in where you'd put the carbon True Foam Genesis in this list too. I forgot to bring that yesterday.
Ooh, okay.
So I'll go first, give you time to talk about, or to think about where you're putting the carbon. So I'm going to go from least firepower to most. So the least, I'd put the carbon True Foam Genesis in this group. So we've got 7 paddles here. So carbon True Foam Genesis, I'd say, it's an entry-level power paddle in my list. And I've drawn the divisions on my Q core, and I've drawn the divisions on my radar charts. Braden classifies as a upper-level all-cord, as well as the the 11624 Power Series. Now, I could be convinced to go that direction, too. I've kind of drawn the line just under that. He's drawn it just over that. So I'm going to keep him in power for now, but I'd like to call out Braden at some point and pick his brain on this because I think those are boundary power.
Are we talking about a particular
paddles.
shape?
No, we're going to talk about these as if
we're
talking about any of their shapes. So,
all right.
Yeah. The one we hit with in terms of the True Foam Genesis was a new 4 shape, but it plays very similar, I'd say, to the 1 and the 3. Just the shape is different. But yeah, what are your thoughts on I'll get your thoughts on the firepower of the carbon in a second. But so that was the bottom of my list in terms of firepower. A notch above that are the Honolulu, these two, the J2NF and the J2FC Plus. One above that would be the Gearbox GX2 Power. One above that, Vatic V-Core. So now we're in the top 3 here.
Okay.
Grooven Laser 16 HD, just above the V-Core. And I still have a tie between the Body Helix Flik F1 and the Rhombus Ripple for the max firepower.
All right.
Yeah. All right. What are yours, Eddie?
We are very close, as usual, John. I don't have the benefits of your metrics, but I think just by feel, we're getting pretty close. And my guess is your evaluation was also based on just play, right?
You mostly play. A couple of these are Q core tested.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So I've got the new Honolulu Pickleball company kind of tied at the bottom of our sample size here with the carbon True Foams.
Okay.
Very close. Hard to distinguish. So I'm going to put those at the bottom of the power.
Okay.
So I agree with you there. I think they are power paddles. but not extreme by any means.
Right.
Above that, I've got kind of a three-way tie for the next level up, and that's with the Grooven, the Gearbox, and the Vatic.
Yep.
Kind of different feeling paddles. They kind of produce power in different ways, but I think ultimately they are pretty similar in just basic response.
Yep. Okay.
And then at the top of my list are the Flik and the Rhombus.
Yeah. So our lists are basically exactly the same. It's just you lumped more than me.
I'm a lumper.
I'm a splitter. Yeah, it's good to know we're feeling the same about these. And these are my very initial first impressions. I'm still playing with no weight bearing on my right leg. So I'm out there with my knee scooter and my peg leg. So by no means am I playing competitively with these, but I'm getting just a really preliminary feel for them.
It's really an interesting experience and experiment, because if you look at the two that I bundled together at the top, the Flik and the Rhombus, they feel nothing alike.
No.
The Rhombus is kind of that hollow feeling. I mean, very, very ripply, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
The Flik, of course, is very buttery, a little softer, but still generating a ton of power and got the perceived trampoline effect. So it's really hard to say like which one is more powerful, because the power generation is created so differently.
Yeah, and I'm glad you jogged my memory here, but I think the Body Helix Flik plays like the original Ripple, the beta version of the Ripple. It's very similar. You remember how lightweight the original Ripple was? It was crazy firepower, more than the Body Helix, but it was very lightweight and it generated power flawlessly. I'd say the Flik F1 sweet spot is even larger probably than the original Beta Ripple, but the original Beta Ripple had a larger sweet spot than the production. And the reason why they had to change it to get it to pass PB core, and what they did was adding some reinforcements down the center of the paddle. So they weighted up the center of the paddle with those carbon fiber stringers to get it to pass, but adding weight to the center of a paddle is never good. You want that weight out to the sides in terms of the feel of the paddle. So it stiffened up the production models, and the sweet spot got a little narrower, and it just doesn't feel it doesn't have the wow factor as the original Ripple or the Body Helix does.
A couple of those Body Helix shots, John, you were just doing that with your backhand, probably a 3-inch swing, and those things were coming back at quite a pace.
Yeah, and the spin on the Body Helix is nuts too. Like the grid is gritty, and you get the dwell. So you can really shape the ball. Let's do this. Let's talk about our forgiveness and feel rankings first, and then we're going to think about what will we take to a tournament out of all these.
Oh, okay. That'll be fun. You want me to start?
Yeah, you start.
So for feel and forgiveness, I've got the Vatic at the bottom of the list. There's nothing wrong with it. I think for the price, it's a great paddle. It generates tons of power, but just that very firm face is, I don't know, a little off-putting.
Yeah.
So I put that at the bottom, by no means at the bottom of the entire library of pickleball paddles in the universe, but for this group,
this is an elite group.
It's on the low end. The Grooven is just above that.
Okay.
Very, I would say just consistent plush paddle. Nothing wrong with it, but nothing terribly special either.
Okay.
Above that are the Gearbox and the Rhombus, kind of both boingy paddles. I kind of like that boinginess, as long as it's controllable. I think of the two, the Gearbox is maybe a little bit more controllable than the Rhombus.
Right.
But in terms of feel, I'd put them pretty well neck and neck. These Honolulu Pickleball Company paddles feel fantastic. In particular, the FC, very firm feeling, very stable, big sweet spots. I like what they're doing here. And then at the top, it's the Body Helix Flik.
Okay.
I do have some experience with it, so maybe that's part of the bias, but honestly, I wouldn't have as many hours as I do with Body Helix unless it felt particularly special, and this one does.
Gotcha. And where would you slot in Carbon from Genesis?
Oh, that's a great question. I put the Carbon, like I did with Power, right up there with Honolulu Pickleball Company.
Okay. You like the feel of that? Okay. All right. And my forgiveness feel rankings, I have the V-Core at the bottom, the Rhombus Ripple just above that. Then I have the carbon true foam Genesis. Then I've got a tie for second for both the Grooven and the Flik. And I've got the Honolulu and Gearbox tied at number one. Yeah, so pretty close, but we diverge more on the feel than on the power rankings, which I think is appropriate. Like if we're totally opposite on power rankings, something's off, right? But feel is very subjective, you know.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, we weren't that far. I mean, I think the relative placement of yours, like one paddle to another, and mine are not that far off.
Right. I think you had, where was your Grooven? Down lower, right?
My Grooven was like tied for second.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. So same as mine. Your carbon was higher than mine.
Tied for second from the bottom, I should say.
Okay. So yeah, it was a little lower. Your carbon was a little
That's
higher.
the one standout,
Yeah.
I would say.
Okay. All right. And we're lumping Gearbox in here because it's coming out in August. It's going to be an upcoming release. It's not an all foam paddle. It's classified as a carbon fiber core paddle, but where else are we going to put it? You know,
Just do a separate episode.
right. So technically not a all foam paddle, but here we are talking about it. All right, Eddie, if you had to take one of these to a tournament tomorrow, which would you choose?
Ooh. I would probably take the. Can I have two?
Yeah,
I need a backup
one and a
paddle,
backup.
right?
Let's do that.
I would take the Body Helix Flik, and I would take the J2FC. And maybe if I have a big bag, I'll take an extra backup paddle in the True Foam hybrid shape.
Okay. If you could only choose one, which would you choose?
I take the Body Helix.
Really? Okay. I like it.
Yep.
I like it. Man, you threw me off with the backup. Now I've got to reconfigure my logic here. I'm going to start with if I could only take one, and then I'll go to the backup.
Okay.
If I don't take one, it would be the Honolulu J2FC Plus. The reason I say that is I love the feel of the Body Helix. I love the feel of the Grooven Laser. But if I was playing a little tight, those would be way too much, especially the Body Helix. I feel like I got to be playing loose and confident. And in a tournament setting, I'm not the most loose and confident person, right? Except on the odd day. Occasionally I am, but for the most part, you can bet that I'm going to be tight and in my head. So I think that for sure the Body Helix would be too much. Now I could get dialed into them. I think, you know, I need more play time with them to know for sure, but I'd feel a little safer with the Grooven Laser, but it's still a little too much. So yeah, I'd go with the J2FC Plus because it's got plenty of power, you know, not as much as the Body Helix or the Grooven, but the control on these is like an all-court paddle, you know.
Yeah.
It's you're not sacrificing much control for that extra power.
And that's why I have this and the carbon in my bag
Okay.
as backups, because
I like that.
if I have a rough session, then it's good to have something kind of reliable, steady, predictable, ready to go.
And I think, you know, I gave away my first choice already by telling you what my second choice, I should say, by telling you what I would do in my bag if I had a second paddle choice. Probably the Body Helix over the Grooven, although I just need more time. At this point, that Body Helix is going to be hard to control for me because it's so much firepower. So probably the Grooven.
Just to sort of demonstrate how tight this grouping is, though, I feel like I could take that Vatic to a tournament tomorrow.
That's true.
And do some damage with it.
Oh, yeah.
Because might not be the best feeling paddle out there.
Uh-huh.
But I was playing with it quite a bit yesterday, and I was just having a blast with it. I mean, you can do so much, in particular with that bloom shape.
Yeah.
Is that what they call it, the bloom shape?
Yeah, the wide body.
Yeah. And I think that shape, of all the shapes, tends to mitigate that harshness the best.
I was going to talk about that too, and I still felt the harshness with the bloom. Maybe it mitigated it for me a little bit, but you were playing with it. You're like, yeah, I like this one better, and I think I had too high of expectations, and I played with it as like as soon as I hit the bow, I'm like a fiberglass feel, you know.
Right.
But you're right. That being said, I could play with any of these, you know, and be happy with them. In fact, I'd never told you this, but the day I ruptured my peroneal tendon on the court, I was playing with Eric, and we were playing at Pickler in like a round robin. It wasn't a tournament, but it was competitive play, you know. And I was playing with my main, the 11624 Vapor, and I was just like, you know what? Feeling the need for a little bit more power, and I switched over to the Ripple V2 R214, so the wide body Ripple, and I was enjoying it. I was like, yeah, this is what I needed today. You know, I need a little boost in power. So even though the Ripple was low on these rankings, but still high up on my overall. In fact, I preferred it on my main over my main that day in particular.
But never again, because look what it did to you.
Ripple.
It ripped you up, man.
Right. Never forget on my foot in Sharpie. Okay. Good stuff, Eddie. That was fun.
Yeah.
Let's move on. I got a Gear of the Week section here, and you haven't had a chance to use these yet, but I'd like for you to try them out too. I've had these bags for a really good while. Dale from 60 sent me their bag lineup, their newer versions months ago now. And I didn't want to talk about them right away because, you know, I didn't have a sense of them yet. But I've used them a few times, and I like them. And they've corrected some things that went wrong with the original Pro Tour bag, and they've produced another bag. But let's start with the gigantic Pro Tour bag first. So this is going to be hard to get into the frame of the. So yeah, you want to.
Oh,
So this guy is
it's bigger than I am.
Yeah. If you want to hold 20 paddles or several paddles and a whole bunch of gear and basically be able to live out of your backpack at a tournament, then this is an option for you for sure. And it's priced at $150. So there's basically everything that pickleball bags have to offer here. They're not lacking in anything. You have the ventilated shoe compartment. You got the lower compartment for dirty clothes. You've got these insulated side pockets that you can put either food or paddles in. You've got the smaller compartments for sorting wallets and important stuff, keys and all that sort of stuff. And it does say that it fits into an aircraft overhead. I don't think that's the case. If you pack that sucker full, you might be able to get through, but it's definitely exceeding the dimensions that they tell you. You know how so the bag dimensions for most airlines are 22 by 14 by 9. And that's the little case you see as you're walking you're walking through security. This bag measures 25 by 12 by 16. So it's well above those dimensions. But I imagine you could sneak that on a plane.
It's soft though. You can crush it down a little bit.
Squeeze it in there. If you don't pack it full, then yeah, you could probably carry it down, but it would be borderline. But there are some extras here that I do appreciate. So if you look at the bottom, Eddie, there has this heavy duty tarpaulin, and then those on the bottom and the back, and those rubber things that kind of, yeah. Now, it does stand up on its back when you pack it, but it doesn't stand up that way when you pack it. So that doesn't stand up on its own, which kind of bugs me. But, I mean, honestly, if I were buying these bags, I would buy this for half the price over the Kitchen bag. Formerly Kitchen, now it's Forward for $300, right? Now, I love that. It's my main bag. I've been using it for a good while, but $300 is a big price to pay. And if I was on a budget, this is a great option.
A different use case too. I see the Forward bag as more of a daily driver. You head to the court with 2 or 3 paddles. It's kind of a tournament bag.
Yeah.
You're out all day.
For sure.
You're carrying multiple things, hydration, extra pair of shoes, change of clothes, all that stuff. You need a little extra room.
And hold that thought for the backpack here. But other extras, I appreciate the C-shaped main entry, really easy to access. The issue with the original versions of these was the top strap broke. It was not reinforced enough, and they've reinforced it now. I haven't had any problems with it. I've used it a few times. One was packed with camera gear, and it had to weigh like 100 pounds. So I really tested that strap with that, and it held up. The YKK's high quality zippers, always a plus. In fact, if a bag does not have YKK zippers, I can't use it. I'm a snob with my zippers. It's got these ergonomic shoulder straps, feel great on your back, and they also converts into a duffel really quickly with that strap, that Velcro strap. Also, 12-month warranty, so decent warranty for a bag. Overall, good stuff. $150 before code, I think, is a good price for that.
Feels like it's got some water resistance.
Yeah, it's that PU leather.
Nice.
Feels good. One other thing I was going to mention about that. I'll think of it in a second. Colors. Good color schemes on that. You can get it in black, or you can get a ruby red, which is a brighter red, or like a maroon red. All of those are sharp color choices.
Be nice if the inside had some alternating color, just to make things a little easier to find.
Thank you for mentioning that. Well, the main downfall of that, dark interior. Darkish. So things can get lost in there pretty quickly.
It's not complete blacked out, but it's gray enough where it's going to be hard to find things.
Yep. All right. Let's move on to the other backpack. So the performance backpack. This guy. Let me give this to you.
Top loader. Like it.
Yep. So this one sells for $110 before code. It also has that tarpaulin bottom. With the kind of rubber feet on it. There's no shoe compartment in this, but they have an extra drawstring bag for shoes, which attaches to the front. They've got a smaller compartment that also attaches to the front for holding other things. And in that front pocket, you can sort your keys in there. It's got the key hook, wallets, phones, all the important stuff goes in that front pocket. It'll definitely fit as a carry-on. It measures 14 by 20 by 10. And again, the carry-on dimensions are 14 by 22 by 9. So it falls within those dimensions. Extras I really appreciate. So if you put the lid back on, the heavy duty 1000D Cordura fabric.
I was going to say, that is thick, man.
Is sick.
Yeah.
It gives me like military grade vibes, super durable. Mm-hmm. And the patches, so I have that Go Next Level on the top, and I love the patch on the back of it. Yeah. That's just attention to detail that I appreciate. Maybe, can you see that in your camera? It's like a PU leather patch, pretty thick, and it's not facing out. So and there's plenty of advertisements for 6-0 on the bag, but I like it that's kind of a personal little touch. Like that's just going to be on your back, but it's just kind of something special for the user.
I'd probably lose that.
You what?
I'd probably lose that.
You'd lose that top one?
Yeah.
I do like the PU leather style of it, but it's kind of a lot of text on the bag overall.
Yeah, nice little zipper up here too, just for the wallet and phone and keys.
Yeah, for sure. That large C-top entry too, like you said, super easy to get into. There's a laptop sleeve in there in addition to that where the paddle sleeve is, and you can fit other paddles in there. Overall, it's large. We came out to the court with 10 paddles in that sucker.
Cavernous, man.
Yeah.
I love these types of bags.
Yeah. For a small backpack, it does well. I like the mesh side pockets too. So you have a big mesh on this side for a big water bottle, and then they've sewn up the mesh down the middle so you can fit 6 or 8 balls in this side pocket over here.
Okay.
So attention to detail. I like the kind of the Cordura fabric. Attention to detail there. It feels rugged. Overall, I think it's a great deal for $110 before code.
Yeah, I had a Selkirk top loader bag that I used for a long time. It fell apart on me, but that style of bag is really convenient.
Yeah.
You can just put it on the ground, self-standing, just throw stuff in there and organize it later.
And this one does stand up on its own. It's not as internally, it doesn't have as strong of an internal frame as the forward bag, but like I said, if I was pinching my pennies and I wanted to get an affordable bag and I didn't have $300 to spend on the forward, I would buy this in a heartbeat. I may buy this over the forward, even if I did have the money and I just wanted to be price conscious. It's
Colors?
Good choice. That's another good thing about this. It comes in this is the ruby red, or it might be the maroon. They also have a ruby red. They have a black. They have more color options for this particular bag as well. I think they have what they call it. That's basically a blue one. Pink and amethyst are the other colors options for this bag.
I like what 6-0 is doing.
Yeah.
A lot of companies just kind of buy what's out there and slap their brand on it.
Yeah.
This is clearly an in-house production.
Yeah. Yeah, I dig it. These are 2 solid options. So good on 6-0.
Very nice.
Eddie, let's move on to Tales from the Ball Cannon.
Tell me a story, John.
It's been a while. Been a while, but basically I wanted to update everybody that I'm switching to the lifetime ball. So I've been agonizing over which ball to use, and I at the beginning of all this whole process, I used the Franklin X40. with holes, and then I switched to the same ball that USAP is using, which is a Franklin X40 without holes. It's basically the same ball as the X40, but before they drill all the holes in it, right? And the reasons why I switched to that ball with holes, as you remember probably, and I talked about it several podcasts ago, is that I'm using an air cannon, and even though it's a big fancy cannon, it's not as fancy as the piston cannon and the sabot cannon that PPL and USAP are using. And their ability to shoot those cannons and the ball comes out and does not spin, and they know exactly which part of the ball will be striking the paddle, gives them more accuracy. Now, USAP doesn't use that accuracy because they don't do a ball correction factor, because their deal is, okay, we're using this holeless Franklin ball. It's more consistent than a ball with holes, which is true. But PPL is like, all right, the ball with holes is what we're playing with on the court. It behaves differently than the holeless ball, which probably does, definitely does. The holeless ball hits way harder. And they're able to correct it by quadrant, which I'm unable to do. So this whole time I'm like, I'd love to use a ball with holes, but I'm not able to correct it by quadrant. And the reason why I wanted to also to use the ball without holes is that it is springier, much more powerful than a ball with holes, because every hole you drill reduces the power of the ball, basically, and slows it down in the air, and it also, the springiness of the ball decreases. But given that my method doesn't allow the same exactness because of my cannon as these agencies, I wanted a bigger spread from the lowest outbound velocity to the highest outbound velocity, so that my paddles have a little bit more room to line up, and I have a little bit more confidence where those paddles line up with respect to each other. Now we're dealing with like 0.000 4 decimal points out, right? That's the level of accuracy we're dealing with here, but I wanted more wiggle room in there. So in comes the lifetime ball. And the reason why I chose that is because A, it's the ball with holes, and B, it's very springy. That's the COR, the coefficient of restitution of that ball compared to every other ball I've tested with holes is way higher. You know, it bounces higher, basically, right? It comes off hotter. So it gives me that spread that I want, but it's also a ball with holes. And I played around with, before I really started going ham on it, with the ball cannon, I played around with a few paddles to see how they lined up, and they lined up well. Now, let's look at two charts here. So here's the old chart that I have with the ball without holes. So this is the Franklin ball without holes. You can see my lowest score was down around 0.43 and my highest score up around 0.60, which is above both the agencies. And we figured out why my ball without holes performed bouncier than USAP's, and that was because it's slightly pressurized at altitude, which on the one hand I was kind of glad about because it provided even more spread for me to slot paddles in. On the other hand, I was always a little bit like, you know, this is a pressurized ball. It's not behaving like a ball with holes. It's not behaving like the ball we play with on the pickleball court. You know, can I trust that things are lining up where they should be? For the most part, they were, but I was getting some outliers, and I was like, all right, I want to try this. Now, the chart down below is my updated chart based on the lifetime ball. And I could have done this. I spread things out. I put the control and all court on the upper part of the chart and moved the power and illegal power down to the bottom end of the chart just to spread things out a bit. But basically the lifetime ball has given me a spread of 0.350 at the lowest end up to 0.520 at the top end. So that's a difference of 0.170. And when you spread it out and look at these into blocks, we're looking at the 100th decimal per block, right? And within that block out to the 1,000th decimal. And it gives me 17 blocks basically to slot in paddles, which is quite a lot. And it's actually exactly the same amount of slots, 17 divisions, with the holeless ball. So I was happy about that. I'm getting a good spread. Definitely bigger than what it would be with the Franklin ball with holes or the Vulcan ball with holes, right? So I don't need the exact precision. I can have a little more confidence that my paddles relative to each other are slotting in where they should be.
So does impact on the Franklin ball, hole or not hole, does that not matter as much?
It matters, but it evens out. So I'm averaging 10 or more hits, and it's, I'm looking at the variability within the ball hits too, and it's about the same as the ball with holes. It's so far. I haven't done a ton of comparisons, but I'm getting a pretty tight spread. Right. A pretty tight spread.
So variance is low.
Yeah. Another reason why I'm using the lifetime ball is it's very durable. And when I was using the X40 with holes, sometimes they'd break in the middle of one paddle. I had to switch balls, and other times they'd last a few paddles. And the lifetime ball doesn't go out of round as easily. It's just a solid ball. It's particularly to use. Whatever your thoughts about the ball on court, it's good to use in the Canon.
My guess is the ball without holes also is, it's heavier, right? Because the holes aren't there.
Right.
And it's pressurized. So that's got to be doing something to the paddle itself, causing potentially
100%
core crushing?
Yeah.
Okay.
You read my mind. It's happened on a few paddles. In fact, one of the first ones that we retested with the lifetime ball came in super high. I forget which one it was. But I was like, man, this lifetime ball's not working. This is an all-court paddle, and it's showing up as, an illegal paddle. And we tabled that one, did some others. They started falling into place. I'm like, let's go back and retest that paddle that got so high with the holeless ball. And the holeless ball got like several orders of magnitude higher than the original measurement. And it was core crushed from shooting it with the Canon.
Right.
And it's happened with, I want to say 3 other paddles. So about 4 total have core crushed during the testing process. Now, that's not to say that we had a perfectly good paddle to begin with, and it's just this holeless ball is crushing them, breaking them, perfectly good paddles. They probably were slightly core crushed to begin with out of the factory, and they probably would have ended up there eventually. But it makes me wonder, and I'm shooting my ball at inbound at 50 miles per hour. USAP is using 60 miles per hour inbound. I wonder how many of their paddles are crushing as they're actually shooting them.
Yeah.
Great
question.
Yeah. So anyway, the results of these, they're lining up pretty much identically. There's a little bit of differences. Some I feel like where there are differences, I feel like the lifetime ball is showing me a better distinction. Other times, it seems like the Franklin ball is showing a better distinction. So the diadem vice, for example, is the highest on the lifetime ball, and it fell much lower, still illegal, but much lower for the holeless ball. The rhombus ripple, I think, is much more accurate with the lifetime ball. The Ripple R2 beta. That was the second beta version that Dong sent, and it was an absolute cannon. That thing was just shooting balls off like no other paddle I've experienced besides the Diadem Hush. And it is really high on the lifetime estimate and lower in the illegal category for the ball without holes. The Diadem Hush is still continuing to show up as illegal, but very low in the illegal, and it should be up there above the Diadem Vice. So something about the Hush is tricking Q Core and PB Core. I imagine it's the same for both of the other labs doing this right now.
I'm trying to find the Hush on your...
I didn't put it in.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
It's somewhere around like the 0.47 range.
I see.
So lower than the Pro Power Elongated, which is crazy because it hits way harder,
Weird.
Yeah, so there's something weird about that. It's such a unique paddle in terms of its soft face and things. Maybe PB Core just doesn't work on it, with the same degree of accuracy as what we're seeing with the other stiff paddles. But yeah, Eddie, any other things you see in here?
It looks like the actual values you're getting with the lifetime ball align closer to the standards as well.
Yeah, true. So
there's no calculation factor to get to the standard, right?
Well, there is. Now mine are going to correlate pretty tightly with both agencies, but they, by chance, fall in line with USAP more or less. So you can see the difference between high-end power and illegal power is somewhere between 0.44 and 0.45, which is about where it is.
Right.
Now, that's purely coincidental because I'm using a different inbound velocity and a different ball. So they're using the Franklin ball without holes at 60 miles an hour. I'm using the lifetime ball with holes at 50 miles an hour. It just happens to
that is an amazing coincidence, but it works.
right. Yeah, it kind of works. So I need to dial in exactly where that boundary is between illegal and legal. And as I test more paddles that I know are where they came in the USAP standards, I can do that. This is more based on the illegal zone is more based on what I know of USAP illegal paddles and not PPL or UPAA legal paddles. I don't know where that 0.385 boundary is going to fall in here because they're not as many paddles have been tested there. It's only pro league paddles, and they're not as public. You don't see paddle companies saying mine failed or mine passed. PPL as often as you do for USAP. But I have a hunch that theirs is going to be lower. That a lot of some of the paddles that passed PB Core for USAP will fail PPL. And it's just a hunch, but I'm kind of thinking that even with a Vulcan ball at 0.385 is going to be much lower than my 0.44 with the Lifetime ball. Mm-hmm. So we'll see. Things will come out eventually from that lab,
So any adjustments moving forward? Where are you taking this?
I did have to adjust the ball correction factor quite a bit because there's a lot more variability between balls with holes in terms of their inherent coefficient of restitution than the Franklin holeless ball. It is more consistent ball overall. So I've had to really hone in, but I finally figured out exactly how to do that. And it took a while, but we're there. So we have a ball correction factor now that's inherent in the Q core that goes back and corrects for that in the PB core formula. So, yeah. Now you know where I'm spending my time, Eddie, and why it's hard for me to get the studio ready by the time you get here. Good stuff. So you didn't even yawn once.
What's that?
You didn't yawn once.
Oh, I'm thinking about other things.
Okay. Yeah.
mostly what you.
Hey. All right, Eddie. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Next topic I want to discuss. Do you think control paddles are an endangered species?
Oh, they kind of already are, right?
Yeah. All right.
So, John, I'm trying to think of control paddles that we've hit with in the recent past.
Right.
The Lux comes to mind. I think that's the one everyone points to. Mm-hmm. Quartz?
Yeah, quartz.
Is that a control paddle?
Yeah, that's very low on the control side of things. We can look at the
Neonic
chart here. Yeah, I think the Neonic flow is that the thing? Flow?
Yeah, flow, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a control paddle. I have not Q-Core tested that. Looking at the chart here, Pickle Hurricane Pro and Gabe's Vantage Pro. They're both control paddles. Volair Mach 2 Forza, Babolat Wizard, Grooven Raw 16H. So those original. Mm-hmm. I think Diadem Warriors on here is low on the control. So I think what the control paddle category is mostly old Gen 1 paddles with a few newer paddles from just the outlier pros who like to play with control paddles like Tyra Hurricane Black and Gabe Tardio. And then Selkirk, good for them. They're sticking to their guns. They still love control paddles. They are coming out with power paddles now too. But, their bread and butter, the Lux, is down in there. And they've upgraded the new Lux to be a little more powerful, and it straddles that line between control and all-court now. So
you said bread and butter. What bread and butter paddle?
Did I say bread and butter? Oh, I said that's their bread and butter.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
However, the bread and butter Invader is close. It came in super low all-court.
I could see that.
Yeah.
So what's the question? Is there still demand for control?
Well, it's more diverse than that, more nuanced. Is there still demand for control? But now that we have a goal for firepower, I think everybody is rushing to get to that 0.43 goal. And we're going to get a cluster of paddles that go in there. And not because paddle companies necessarily want to produce the most powerful paddle, although that's one incentive. But consumers are incentivizing them to do that because everybody wants the most powerful paddle on the market, right? It's fun to play with them, and myself included, right? Not necessarily the best paddle choice for people, but if your sole goal in pickleball is to have fun and you like to be a banger, then go for it. Go for that 0.43, go for the Flik. However, if you're playing at the 3.0 to 3.5 level and you want to get better and be less one-dimensional, I feel like the extreme power paddles are probably not your best choice, unless you're an ex-tennis player and that's your bread and butter, right? So long-winded answer to your question. I think it's more nuanced. I think consumers are incentivizing paddle companies to get the most elite tier power, and because they're being rewarded for that. And there's some outliers in terms of the pros who still love to play with control paddles. But for the most part, every pro is playing with the power paddle, including Ben Johns, who still loves the cat and mouse game, but he's playing with one of the most powerful paddles on the market for doubles. Interestingly, for singles, he's using his original Perseus, not even the 3S.
I think there's still like a lot of demand for just that level, just off of elite power.
Yeah.
I love the Franklin C45 and the Vatic Saga, and those are, I would still call them power paddles, but they are fairly low on the spectrum, I would say, compared to the elite tier.
Yeah. There's a big clustering of paddles in the bottom of the power tier category. So we've got 11/6/24 Power Series. We've got the Carbon True Foams. We've got the Honolulu J2NF and J2FC Plus. Just a little bit higher than that is the Proton Flamingo and the Gearbox GX2 Power. That's getting into the kind of the middle of the power range. Yeah. So I feel like there's definitely.
But this is a great example, I think, of something that a newbie could pick up and do just fine with, learn the game, not necessarily focus on power, but learn all aspects of the game and do so quite well.
Yep. But short answer is control paddles are doomed. I think what's going to end up happening is they're going to stop making control paddles or paddles that fit currently into the control category, and I'm just going to have to readjust my scale. So some of the lower end all courts are going to be the new control, and we're going to move everything up the scale a little bit.
Well, for a year now, power paddles have gotten more controllable.
Yeah, true.
And so you don't necessarily have to pick control or power as you did 2 years ago, when power paddles were, the Black Ace was completely uncontrollable. You're spraying balls everywhere. But that's a choice you had to make if you wanted power.
Yeah.
Whereas today, there's not so much sacrifice.
So that kind of makes purely control paddles a little more irrelevant today, because you can conceivably get close to the same level of control that you get with let's say a Selkirk Lux 2 with a low-end power paddle. Would you go that far? Definitely in the all-court range, I feel like you can get that level of control. But
True Foam Genesis, I think.
Yeah.
Something like this.
That's for the Selkirk Lux 2. Those with even more forgiveness in the control realm. Let's do the Pickle Hurricane Pro. Is there anything in the power category that you think has as much control? I don't think so. But it's getting close. That chasm is closed a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another way to look at it is, if you choose a paddle like a Lux or something very low on the power scale, you're sacrificing something. Whereas with a power paddle, particularly one low on the power scale, I argue that you're really not sacrificing anything, or very little, comparative to what you'd be giving up on the control side.
I think you are sacrificing some control, but the gap there is so much smaller that you can absolutely adapt to that level of control and probably play the control game just as well as you could with one that's easier and more forgiving in the control realm.
Yeah, I think going to be easier to pick up that gap in control from a power paddle than it is to try and gain more power, extreme amount of power for some people with a purely control paddle.
Yeah.
And we've seen people put away balls with a Lux, but it's not very many that can do that.
Jack Sock comes to mind, but not too many. Control paddles, at least as they're currently defined, are going the way of the dodo. That was a good discussion.
Yeah.
All right, so
want to do some Q&A?
Let's do some Q&A.
All right, I've got a few locked and loaded here.
And I have not seen any of them.
No. And there were, I'm going to sort of combine a few here at the beginning, and this is in response to the poll as far as like what characteristics that you like or don't like in your paddle. And a couple of our listeners were surprised that spin durability was not explicitly called out in the responses. That, if they could get permanent spin or at least something close to that, that they would be all over that, even more so than max spin right out of the box.
Right.
Are companies doing anything about that? Or are they so focused on power now that spin has kind of taken a back seat?
That's a great question. I mean, Selkirk's, publicly doing something about it with their InfiniGrit, and signs point to the fact that it is more durable than initial signs. There's not been enough testing of it so far, but it does seem to be more durable than the current winner, which is peel ply, so raw carbon fiber. And I know of at least one other major company who is doing something who thinks they have something several times more durable than raw carbon fiber. Also, I can't talk about it yet. But
you realize you say that on every episode.
Is it getting annoying?
To me, it is.
Well, you know it too, I think. Anyhow, so yeah, some companies are doing that, but I don't think it's as important as it should be to the majority of companies. Because I agree, and maybe it's that they're not being incentivized by the consumers also, because consumers are willing to currently replace their paddles every few weeks or months, for various reasons. And we know that's the case for power. People are choosing more dispensable paddles that break down quicker and cost more than they are more durable paddles that perhaps aren't the elite tier power. So it's incentivizing companies to make more disposable paddles at this point. But I'd love to see more durable spin for sure.
All right. Question from Franco Cuminato. Hope I'm saying that right. Y'all should come up with an objective measurement of dwell time. Maybe use a super high frame rate camera, shoot a ball, and measure how many milliseconds the ball is in contact with the paddle. Maybe it's only a fraction of a millisecond. Those cameras are probably extremely expensive, though. And he's right about that.
They are. They're the price of an automobile.
Are you working on dwell time? And
it's in my mind, but yeah, so far it's been cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
For the same reason.
Do you see that as the way to do it, though?
It's a way, but what I'm worried about is that I would invest a lot of money in a high-speed camera, and it would give me accurate data, but the data wouldn't match up with our subjective feel of dwell time on a paddle in a similar way that sweet spot isn't as objective as we would like it to be.
Yep.
So I think that is a great way to do it. Measure frame rates on a 10,000 or 20,000 frames per second camera, and you're definitely going to be able to distinguish which paddles actually get more dwell. But I think balls don't stay on paddles very long at all. They come off in microseconds. So I don't know if that difference would be very profound between paddles, and even if it was, it'd be such a minute difference. Maybe what we're feeling and interpreting as dwell time is more the vibration frequency, similar to what we're doing for sweet spot.
Could be a perception thing and not an actual phenomenon.
Right.
A couple of paddle questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. This one from Jason Walker, 1959. John, where would you stack the SLK ERA and Firepower and Forgiveness lists? Lots of people are loving that paddle.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's right there with the 11624 Power Series at the low end of the power category. And I think if you look at the X-rays, they're constructed exactly the same, probably in the same factory, but there's something a little different besides the layup. The surface layup is different for these two paddles. I think the Selkirks have more of a personality of their own than the X-rays let on, and a lot of people are loving them. I think, but I don't see them as being any more or less powerful than the 11624s. How about you?
Maybe even a touch poppier.
Yeah, definitely the pop is greater, but I feel like the pop power average out to be about the same firepowers.
Yeah, I can swing that.
Yeah.
John, as for the Vatic Pro V-Core, would you say it's hard to control? You said you prefer the Saga Flash better. We both said that. 14 or 16? Actually thinking of upgrading from a Prism Flash 16.
14 or 16 for the Saga?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, 14 Saga is pretty great. And I feel like that's a really good balance between pop and
For a
control.
14, it's kind of a surprise.
Yeah. So I might recommend that unless you're, 16 die hard and you don't care for the added stiffness, even though the Saga is not a stiff paddle. But yeah, I also do think that so far my experience with the V-Core is that it's pretty hard to control.
Yeah.
Because you get a lot of firepower, but it's also very poppy. And like I said, I don't have enough any court time in competitive environments because of my foot with any of these paddles. So I'm gonna have to give really preliminary ideas, but I imagine it's gonna be hard to control through the transition zone.
Agree. Lionel So asks if the CFC patch in the Body Helix means differential contact / energy return and on and off center shots. And you could probably ask the same question about the Genesis, right?
Yeah. I have not noticed that in the Genesis or the Flik. I've had more experience with the Genesis pre-injury, and I know a lot of people say they do feel that. I do not. Maybe I'm just not as tuned into my paddle. But I feel like if I do feel it, it feels like a smaller sweet spot, and the True Foam Genesis has a decent sweet spot. I wouldn't call it oversized, but maybe that's my perception of that steeper drop off outside of the 4-inch patch of fiberglass in there. But if you're hitting that far away from the center of the paddle, I think
You've got other problems.
kind of asking for it. I mean, I'm blaming it on myself because I do hit there a lot, and I'm like, yeah, that didn't feel good. A lot of vibrations didn't go over the net. I should hit the center of the paddle.
It's a pretty sizable patch, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
it's big.
It's
It only leaves like probably 2 inches on each side of the paddle that it's not covered with the patch.
yeah. And the paddle face, frankly, is not a 100% usable space. I don't think it's ever meant to be.
No. I mean, it'd be nice if it was, but it's not. So, yeah, I feel like maybe that's contributing to the feel of a slightly smaller sweet spot, but I'm not feeling like massive, discrepancies across the face of the paddle. It's pretty predictable. It's like you hit it in the center, you get a predictable response. You hit it off center, it's not going to be as nice.
Right. All right, one more question, John. And what's that round thing underneath your visor?
Oh, this thing? I saw that question in the comments, and I was like, what is it? I don't understand the question. Finally, I pieced it together. So that is a Melon logo. These are all Melon hats I'm mostly wearing.
Yeah.
I put a logo on the bottom of the hat.
Is it functional or is it completely just
I think it's
decorative?
just decorative. Yeah, it's just their thing.
I heard that there could be a function for that, and that's if your hands are real dirty or working under the car or whatever, and you need to mess with your hat, it'll give you a place to touch, get your hat off without getting your hat all.
That is probably the case. I mean, even if it wasn't intentional, you're going to have a spot up top unless just your thumb is dirty. Just
Get it off your head like that.
That's right. Push it off. So, yeah, I kind of dig it. It's just another little thing that Melon does to make their hats feel premium.
When's your code coming out?
It was week before last.
Oh, I thought there was an
24
issue with it. No?
No.
Okay, well, we'll wait for the next one.
Yes, sir.
Maybe that was my issue. Well, John, another great show.
Yes, indeed. This one is a more reasonable time frame. I'm going to put up a poll next week asking for some feedback on the podcast. And one of the questions is, do you like the podcast to be under 30 minutes to an hour, hour and 15 minutes, or hour and a half or longer? Does it matter? I mean, honestly, I don't know. I've heard from some people in California that sitting in traffic in LA, they love super long podcasts because it gets them through that hour and a half commute. But I imagine that there's a limit to the amount of time people want to listen to us.
We should still set a record of some sort at some point.
2.5 hours.
5 hours.
We'll do an interlude in the center of the podcast where it's just you and I watch a television show.
Sounds like fun, as always.
Yep. Thanks, sir.
Yep.